All right. So everything that you saw in the keynote, this is going to be the next level of depth. All right. So let's get started. So our agenda essentially for the next 45 minutes is just going to focus on some of the key things around, starting off with the context setting of System of Work and Teamwork Graph. Then we'll look at some of the key experiences that Teamwork Graph is going to enable. All right. And what is it exactly that we're unlocking? Yes, the pizza joke still works. All right. Along with that, we have smart links. We'll look at some of the Teamwork Graph connector work, cross-product applications as well. And then what are the things that we're considering next? Okay. So System of Work is a philosophy of how technology-driven organizations should work in, and the Teamwork Graph is the information layer that drives it. That's kind of the crux of it. But the bottom line is, it's not just for technology-driven organizations, it's any organization. All right? Wherever work happens and the way you're capturing it, the multi-dimensional aspect. All right? Now, typically, we usually think of things in a very linear way. So cause and effect. What graph allows us to go do is look at things in a very non-linear fashion. All right? Oops, sorry, wrong button. Again, I'm still getting used to the clicker. All right? So essentially, that's the key thing, is to be able to go ahead and look at some of these non-linear relationships and be able to go maximize the business outcomes for an organization. All right? Because typically, what we end up doing is we generally focus on mostly IT and dev teams. But this is essentially the entire gamut of an organization that works. All right? So, and unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of these things are interdependent. All right? The IT team cannot work in separation from dev teams. The dev team cannot work in separation from product teams. So these are all these different interrelationships. And somehow, when we're very maniacally focused on one, we tend to lose out what are some of the contextual ramifications across the board. A very simple thing like impact analysis. All right? When I want to go ahead and identify, if I go, how many of you have actually deployed stuff in a cloud environment? Just a show of hands. How many times have you had to actually roll back a feature because it broke someone else's work? All right? Well, that's exactly what I mean. All right? System of Work is to kind of look at that, and that's just the technical aspect of things, all right? Sometimes you could actually publish an HR policy, all right, without knowing what the downstream ramifications are. So everyone has similar problems. And that's essentially what System of Work is to be able to go say, how can we codify some of these working patterns and bake them into the products themselves so that the experience looks completely fluid from one to the other. All right? But essentially, the key principles are people, processes, and tools. That has not changed. People organize themselves in teams. All right? They have a set of processes that allow them to align their work to goals, and they plan and track that work, and tools that allow them to go ahead and share that knowledge based on what they've gone ahead and done. All right? Everything builds on top of the other. And if we were to just take these elements by themselves, we're now able to go and superimpose any type of work because all of them fit these parameters. Okay? So, what does it lead us to? Faster time to value, engaged teams, and lo and behold, higher ROI. All right? All of us saw this diagram there. The foundational layer for System of Work is this key area over here. All right? Inside the Atlassian portfolio. So we have leadership teams that focus on the ROI aspect of things on side with things like Align and Focus. All right? Software teams using Compass, Bitbucket, and Jira Product Discovery, and Jira Service Management. But then again, if you were to replace that, and you can now look at leveraging some of these set of components, building a marketing campaign. All right? So for example, an ad agency building an ad campaign also has to go ahead and track work. There's customer requirements coming in based on that ad campaign that they're going ahead and running. All right? So it is not just pigeonholed in these particular areas. We're now breaking the silos even within the Atlassian platform as well. All right? And it is powered by Teamwork Graph. Now, I know you guys saw this in the keynote as well, but here's the key thing, or sorry, you folks saw this key thing in the fact that we have goals, work, knowledge, but there are other elements as well. Now, we're first starting off by building some of these entities already into the graph in and of itself. Eventually, we'll also provide ways where folks like yourselves can actually go ahead and add those kind of entities into the graph, as it were. All right? But that's how we're first starting down this path. Because of these type of relationships, you're able to build various kind of intelligent operations, including things like automation, analytics, and Rovo and search. All right. So a lot of these kind of capabilities are now going to be baked in and driven by this unified data layer. So no longer are we looking at, oh, Confluence data stays inside Confluence, so we only know things about Confluence. All right. And then Jira data stays inside Jira. We're now building this common data layer so we can actually see between Confluence and Jira how those things interact. And beyond that, including even third-party products that are baked into our supply chain. Okay. So what are some of the graph-powered experiences? I'm now going to pass it over to Adam to kind of get you to the next level of detail.
All right, Kartik. Thank you. Yeah, we'll let you off there because you've already had to fill in the keynote this morning. So I'll take over. And yeah, now we can really start getting into the detail of what we mean by extending the graph and then what kind of customer experiences that's going to unlock. So imagine if via Forge, we ship the ability to be able to build a connector for the teamwork graph. So you can push all of this in, the data, the relationship, the events, and the action, and that feeds through to these platform experiences. And carrying on from the keynote again, let's stick with our friends, our customers in the automotive industry, but we'll look at a slightly different use case here. And so, as we talked about, highly regulated industry, they need to make sure the work they're doing to build cars traces back to strict requirements, test cases, and they can vary for different models. But all their work happens in Jira, right? And so they need to make sure they've got the link between the work they're doing and their requirements. And so what we're going to do is open up smart links so you can extend them via Forge. And we're also going to have connectors so that you can push some of that data or whatever that data you need into the teamwork graph inside the Atlassian cloud, and we can light up even more experiences. So you can have enterprise search where you can search now for a particular set of work that you're doing, the requirements, the test cases, the work items all come up in the same place. That also flows through into Rovo because this is the common data layer powering all of these things. So now you can build an agent or even just use the general Rovo chat to say, this requirement's about to change. What work do we have in progress? What test cases is that going to affect? Can you create an executive summary for that? Put it into a Confluence page? All of that becomes possible. Not only that, because we have this information coming in, we can now generate analytics off that. And so that can feed into Atlassian Analytics or potentially the new dashboard experiences we're building into Home. And so now you can do your reporting inside Atlassian as well. And you can have your analytics tracking your work as well as, test cases that are closed, test runs that are passing, all that good stuff comes into one place. And finally, sort of the last piece of the puzzle is automation as well. And so now that we have this data going in, we can also generate events off that data. And you can create automation triggers when new requirements are updated, when they're changed, when they're deleted, and then build workflows around that can even, then invoke a Rovo agent, which then queries the graph, and so on and so on. So now let's go one level deeper again, and we're actually going to start talking about exactly what kind of APIs we're thinking of building and what's going to be coming in the coming months and the rest of this year. I am going to show a few things that are still a little bit half-baked and potentially we wouldn't normally show at an Atlas camp, but we think sort of the change here and the shift and the opportunity is big enough that it's worth sharing them now with you and so that we can start getting your feedback. So think of this more like a bit of a public RFC rather than something that's definitely going to GA. But with that in mind, let's kind of dive in. So hopefully everyone knows what a smart link is. You take a URL for a thing, you paste it into the editor, and it renders in a nice, pretty link. It can be inline, it can be this kind of card view, or it can also be a full embed as well. You can hover over it to get more info, and naturally it respects the permissions of that third-party system as well. So you link your Atlassian account with the third-party account, and then you make sure that users only see information that they have access to. And smart links are also getting smarter, and we now have this new list view smart link, where if you paste a link to sort of a Jira search or a JSM asset search, it'll actually show you all those Jira issues in a list, and then you can actually update those issues through actions and the teamwork graph as well. And so, we've had macros like this before that have sort of done similar things in sort of different ways with APIs and things, but now we're sort of baking this into the platform and it becomes this kind of reusable capability that we can apply to more use cases. As you mentioned, we're going to need these smart links. We want them to be able to, or we want customers and developers to be able to create smart links to any of the systems that they're using. It could be a legacy sort of on-prem system that they've got, or it could be, the people in this room adding smart links to their marketplace apps. And the good news is this is going to be super easy to do using Forge. There's just sort of some high-level concepts we'll be introducing that we'll need to work through. Firstly, they're not part of Jira, they're not part of Confluence. They're going to be part of a new product in Forge called the Teamwork Graph. And then they're going to be able to work sort of across all the different products in the site. I've also sort of given it a more generic name here. It's not called the Smart Links module, it's called the Entity Provider module. And that's because we sort of see this fundamental capability to be able to take a link and then resolve some data from it as being, really useful and something that could in future be applied to different use cases and things. So that's the thinking there. And then finally, you need to tell us what kind of entity it is, or sometimes we call them nouns. And so, that sort of tells us a little bit about the schema of the thing that it is. There's the practical reasons for that. Some smart links might display slightly different attributes, but when we start talking about Teamwork Graph, that becomes even more important, which I'll get to in a second. Then the rest of it should be the easy part. So, you need to define a pattern for the URL that you're going to match to. You need to give it a function, which will be the resolver, and return the data that we need. The other good thing is that it will work with Forge's outbound OAuth 2. We made a lot of improvements to that last year, so it's a lot more flexible and can now sort of connect with a lot more flavors of OAuth 2 because every OAuth 2 API is different, frustratingly. But yeah, of course, if you're just adding smart links to your marketplace Forge app and the data is just in Forge storage or you use Forge Remote, you can use that as well. But if it is an OAuth 2 API, that should be really easy. And then finally, you need to write the resolver. Should also be pretty straightforward. Take the URL, get the identifier out of it, call the third-party API, get the data back, turn it into the right format that we need, and then we'll do the rest. Cool. So that's the Smart Links part. Smart Links is going to be really great because it's lightweight. They're going to be easy to build, and it solves that problem of bringing the right data into the right context in the Atlassian products where our customers need it. But it's also not going to satisfy all of those sort of use cases I showed earlier. It's not going to appear in search. You're not going to be able to do analytics off it or events off it or anything like that. If we want to get to that level of integration, we're going to need to build more of a connector that's actually pushing that data into the graph. And Atlassian is currently building out a set of connectors today as part of Rovo. Now I think we have about 10 third-party connectors, which is, going out and fetching that data and bringing it back in. And we've also, committed to building out a bunch more as well. So, the top, most popular connectors that our customers are using, we will build those as part of Rovo, and I'm sure you'll see a big announcement next team. But even if we get to those 30, 50, 100 connectors, it doesn't get us to the hundreds or probably thousands of apps that our customers are using. And importantly, it doesn't get us to all the marketplace apps that are also holding, critical data for the system of work, whether it's diagrams, timesheets, test cases, budgets, project plans. All of that stuff lives in your apps, and we'd really like to get that data into the Teamwork Graph as well. And so you saw a prettier version of my diagram in the keynote. Sorry, you have to put up with this one. But we have, these Atlassian-built connectors, taking data from the third-party system, putting it into the graph. What we are adding is the ability to do that using Forge. And so you'll be able to, define the auth provider, turn the data into the shape that we need, push that into the Teamwork Graph via, obviously a level of data governance and permissions and things like that. And then that flows through and lights up those platform experiences. So it goes into our data lake for analytics. It can go into our search indexes for enterprise search and Rovo, and into the automation platform as well. So you can use it to fire up automations. Now, if you've been in the ecosystem for a while, you might start be thinking, well, yeah, I've seen something similar to this in the past. We have Open DevOps in Jira, where we have a lot of connectors, including sort of marketplace built ones that push in, pull requests and feature flags and all the rest of it. We also have JSM assets where you can build importers on Forge as well. And now we have Teamwork Graph. And I think, there is a lot of overlap there. And perhaps like one mental model to use is just to think it is kind of like Open DevOps, but like on steroids. And we're trying to do it not just for the technical teams, like Kartik mentioned earlier. We're trying to do it for everyone in the organization, right? And so it's not just your tech teams, it's not just your service management teams. This is for everyone. And that means it's a little bit different. So it's not, necessarily associated with a Jira issue like it is for the Open DevOps tooling. You're going to be able to create these relationships to different types of entities depending on what the use case is. As far as the nouns go, or those entity types, as I mentioned, they are going to be strongly typed. At the moment, we have a set of entities that you're going to have to conform to. As Kartik said, eventually we'll work out a way that we can make those more flexible and customizable. But for now, we kind of have made this trade-off that we want to know what that shape of the data is, because that allows us to, build more useful experiences with it. You can't, index it as well if it's sort of coming in any old shape. And so for the moment, that's kind of our priority. And lastly, it does mean that the way permissions work is slightly different. So with the Open DevOps stuff, you push that data in and it's tied to the Jira issue and the permissions around that. For JSM assets, the admin does the import and they can set the permissions on that. The way the Teamwork Graph connectors work is more that it's sort of attempting to mimic the permissions in the third-party system. So you connect your Google Drive, it brings in all your documents, and then I, as a user, can only see the documents that I have access to. How that evolves into support scenarios and use cases for marketplace apps and things, we might need to change that and evolve that. But that's kind of one of the discussions we'd love to have with you all. So these are some of the standard nouns or entity types that we have today. As you'd expect, we have goals and teams and projects, those core parts of the graph. We have documents and work items, which are actually kind of deceptively flexible as well. So, a document's not just a Word document or a spreadsheet. It can be PDFs, it can be code, it can be forms, lots of different things sort of sit beneath that. We've also added a few of those DevOps nouns as well, so you can bring in your repo with its pull requests and branches. We've obviously had to build out a set to support some of those connectors we've built for Rovo. So, to have a Slack connector, we need a conversation, we need messages. To have the Figma connector, we need designs. And now we're starting to branch out to those sort of adjacent spaces to Atlassian as well. So we have some for the HR space, we've got some for the CRM, the sales type of space. We're going to continue building those out. For the sake of when this goes to EAP and we're working with partners in the room, we can certainly work to onboard more nouns as well. So requirements and test cases from my early examples aren't there yet. We know we're going to need to get those, but it would be great to sort of work with you all as we kind of define those as well. When you sort of come to looking at, a noun itself or the entity, there's going to be some common attributes, some are going to be required, some won't. At a bare minimum, it has to have an ID, it has to have a name, it has to have a URL, and then things like description created by, they can be optional. And then there'll be specific attributes compared to the type of noun that it is. So this is a pull request example. So a pull request has to have a status, it has to have a source branch, but something like comment count is optional. It's really good for relevance, for search indexing, so it's great if we can get it, but it's not something that we definitely need. And then, as I mentioned, the permissions. So it's designed to replicate the permissions from the system that it's coming in from. So you can give a list of users, you can give a list of groups, and then each entity has its permissions set on that. And then there's also the concept of a container. So, a pull request could use the repository as a container, and then it inherits the permissions of that. Cool. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, ingestion, that sounds great, but what I'm really interested in is how I'm going to be able to consume this graph. This is going to be really valuable data. There's lots of cool things that can be built on top of it. This is something that we're working on in parallel, but I'm not quite confident enough in what we're going to build yet to put a code snippet up on the page. But it's certainly something that we'd love to chat to you about. It is sort of tricky in that we need to be really mindful of like data governance and permissions and getting that right. What kind of controls do we want to give admins for letting third-party apps access their graph? What kind of controls do we want to give you as developers also? If you're contributing data to the graph, is it okay if that then gets shared on with third parties? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Those are the kind of things we need to think through and work through. So it'd be a great thing to chat about. Sweet. So that's Teamwork Graph. And the next thing that we're going to be doing, and that's sort of the last big thing for this presentation, is cross-product apps. Cross-product apps are really important sort of philosophically from System of Work. Part of it is around sort of bringing down these silos of the products and bringing data to customers and users where they need it in context. And so, that's not going to work if our apps are still tightly bound to individual products. So that's something we need to open up. We also need to do it to enable this new Teamwork Graph workspace. So if you have a Jira app and you also want to connect it with Teamwork Graph, that'll become a cross-product app. And then we also have, Atlassian Home, which is super important for System of Work and teams and goals and everything else. And so we're going to want to be able to open up extensibility there. And that's not going to want to be in isolation either. You're going to want to be able to mix that with Jira and Confluence and everything else. So where are we at with cross-product apps today? For me, I think it's one of the most sort of exciting and maybe untapped potential of Forge today. Like, it's always been one of the big advantages over Connect in that it's not just a framework that's part of Jira and part of Confluence. It is this platform-wide extensibility platform. It's just that we haven't yet we've been prioritizing all the other things to bring up the extensibility, to add the storage, that we haven't really put the focus on cross-product apps. But now, thanks to System of Work and thanks to being where we are, we can kind of get into the fun stuff. So the way it works on Forge today is you can install an app into multiple products within the same site, but you can't install them into siteless products. So sorry, Bitbucket, it's kind of out on the own. You can do it via the CLI. You can do it with a direct distribution link. You can't get it up onto Marketplace, which is obviously a huge problem for everyone in this room. And there are some clever developers who have done some kooky things with side apps and companion apps, but it's not a great experience, and we want to make that better. And also the functionality is kind of mixed. Like, you can make cross-product API calls, but you can't use the same Forge storage instance. So if you create a Confluence macro and you have a Jira issue panel and they're both reading and writing to storage, it's actually separate instances of storage, and so you can't share data across the app.
And by the way, that's a good thing. It's a feature, not a function, just primarily because what you want is we want to be able to go ahead and encourage microservices architecture properly, so that you're not talking to databases directly, but through proper API contracts. So when that thing happens, especially when Adam was talking about bringing in, especially when you deal with sensitive data, should a separate Forge app that may or may not be trusted, should that be able to access that data in the first place? So those are the kind of safeguards that we're now baking in. So I know it's being shown as a negative, but it's actually a net positive overall.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Cool. And so what are we going to do as a first step? So the first milestone we're shooting towards and working on at the moment is we're going to solve that core problem of being able to install into multiple apps in the same site and get that up to Marketplace. So step one is probably finally just be able to have a Jira and Confluence app. That's going to be possible. Compass comes along for the ride, and also the Teamwork Graph as well. And so, yeah, that's kind of our first step. How we're going to enable that again, and sort of taking another sort of small step, is that you will still need to declare which product is your primary installation for now. And that's important because things like user licensing kind of needs to come from somewhere, where your data residency pinning, works, will come from that primary product. And yeah, that kind of is just a simpler first step to get us where we want to be. As some of those marketplace things we talked about in the keynote, like license decoupling and things like that come online, we can even make that more flexible. But this gives us a first step in the right direction, and it's less of a mental model shift for everybody as well. And yeah, you will be able to access the same storage from Confluence and Jira if it's the same app. Where we're going to take cross-product apps in the future, I mean, it's kind of almost the sky is the limit, but it is something that we're going to get to gradually over time. So obviously we want to be able to connect with poor old Bitbucket out there. Eventually when Loom and Trello and things come online, we want to be able to connect with them too. We want to be able to have multiple sites, so you can have Jira in multiple instances, and Atlassian Home as well. All of that is where we want to get to, but that's going to be sort of progressive. So stay tuned on more of the roadmap on that. Also, I should have mentioned that Julia, my colleague in Sydney, is going to be publishing an RFC on the first milestone either this week or next, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, keen to move that forward. And then one more thing is we are working on our first Atlassian Home extensibility on Forge. I'm not sure if Alberto's here. I didn't see him come in. Raise your hand if he's here. No. I think he might be late arriving. He had some travel problems, but Alberto is our principal engineer working on this, and yeah, he's going to be here this week. He's got some cool proof of concepts that he wants to show you, and especially if you're in the business of building Jira dashboard widgets and Jira dashboards and that kind of app, yeah, he'd love to talk to you. So almost at the end, but where to from here? So Kartik's already promised the EAP for connectors. But yeah, at the moment, we're sort of just at the point where we're registering for interest. So firstly, we want to make the most of this week. Come track us down. We'll be at the booth. We'll be around. We want to hear about your use case for building to any of these things. And so, yeah, once we have your details, then obviously for research and questions and things like that, that's great. And we can also let you know as soon as the EAP starts.
And then not only that, like if there are particular industry verticals that you're interested in where you think these can be applicable and actually seen as something that's meaningful, then we're more than happy to even have those conversations as well. So it's just, kind of teeing off of what Adam said, sky's the limit, all right? I'm not saying the fact that we'll be able to address everything out of the get-go, but it's definitely one of our biggest intent around this is to be able to build things in a very common denominator way that you can go ahead and build. Like, for example, for us talking about things like cross-product apps. Those of you who've been with Atlassian long enough know this is completely net new, all right? The fact that I can now install a product that can actually permeate and get access to across the entire Atlassian real estate is a headache that I know I've heard from a lot of folks are saying, why the heck? It's the same product or same company, all right? So this is some of the things that we're constantly working on and chipping away as we speak. And the benefit of a lot of this stuff is as Teamwork Graph continues to grow, it will enable a lot of these things. So eventually, my hope is the fact that we won't actually ever have a single product ever, all right? Like a Jira app working only exclusively with Jira. It will always be a cross-product experience as such. So, we're imploring all of you and all your collective enthusiasm to come and work with us and help us build this thing in a way that will be useful for you folks to go build on top of, all right? Thank you.
Yeah, well said. Thank you.